So then prayers before the teachings on page 1 or on the screen. Page 1 in the text. From the heart of the Savior, 100 deities of Tashita, on the peak of a cloud resembling a clump of extremely white, fresh curd, King of Dharma, omniscient Losandrapa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me, on a lion-throned lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit from my mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons to spread the teachings. Your holy mind has the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanations and ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renown. To you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember, I prostrate. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, light, scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated, I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite 3 vows that I've collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practices, degenerate age, made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Save you sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion, the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I've collected benefit the teaching of all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of the perfect pure Losandrapa's teachings to shine forever. And so then over on page 5, mandala offering, reciting then with the Tibetan phonetics. Sa shi po ki shu shi me tog tam ri ra bling chi ni de gem pa di Sangye Shinbu Mite Owa Yido Konandak Shin La Cho Pa. By the merits of having offered this mandala to the Lama Tsongkhapa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize, teach the victorious one, Losandrapa, who had the morality of an eminently pure way of life, was courageous in the extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of the 2 stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamiya Tayami. And then on page 6, where it says visualization for cleaning impurities. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of the perfect pure Father and Sons, and combining into one into my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of a tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, their imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. And then across to page 8, we recite this 5-line verse 3 times. Mimeze weta chenrezi dreame camper wampo jumper yan dumo palu jongwe sanweta ganchen tempens and can sankapa lozandra ble sabla sowa de Mimeze weta chenrezi dreame camper wampo jumper yan dumo palu jongwe sanweta ganchen tempens and can sankapa Lozandra ble sabla sowa de mimeze we te chenrezi dreame kempe wampa jumpa yang dumo palu jongwe sangwe da ganchen tempens and kan sankapa Lozandra ble sabla sowa de. and then prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, as the spiritual head of Chenrezig Institute. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children, the victorious ones, Sravaka and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losangs, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge, infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, from other living beings, you suddenly depart to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth, the blessings of the ocean of Vitti jewels, and the great ways, the bodhicitta of the children, the victorious ones, may the smile of reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples.
Sangye Chodang Tsojun Chonum La Changju Pardu Dani Kyabsunch Dagi Chushi Jebanda Dagi Rolampen Sanjin Drupara Sho Sangye Chodang Tsojun Chonum La Changju Pardu Dani Kyabsunch Dagi Chushi Jebanda Dagi Rolampen Sanjin Drupara Sho Sangye Chedong Tsojin Chonum La Changzhe Pardu Dani Kyabsun Dagi Chushi Yebanda Dagi Rolam Ben Sanjin Drubar Sho Kangi Tuzi Nizone Tawa Tamche Pambi Chere Tambi Chun Tenze Kwadam Tela Changze Lo Namo Lai Keda Luda Nojiki Tripan Dada Mi Kenam Rwa Kunji Dhanam Chizamba Tamche Kedu Dagi Chuden Do. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Why are you laughing? Jodele.
Jodele.
Ke kude. Chuket.
No.
La.
Hello. Hello.
Ya tako. No. Tanganzo. Dele ya ruru cheti. The chu number sanji we chu. Chiki cheto. Nganzo ruru chiki yorasra. Yenza tangi chi. Kanko de roch. Ani. Ma chi shuyak tabshi cheko sra.
So the very purpose of our gathering or meeting here is to discuss Dharma, and I'll try my best to explain as simple as I can.
Dele nganzo chiki chu di. Ngoma chu kongi. Ani chik suzu. Lunga chawa che sha chigda yen chu ngon chu tsawi jela yang pena karsa ta ji lunga chawa che tang gyo ro go tsuki ta ni so ri leg do asra.
So with regard to the Dharma, we can understand that our body, speech, and mind, our way of thinking, our behavior is different before we are introduced to Dharma and our behavior after we are being introduced to Dharma. So there is a difference in transformation between these two.
Teda chu dus ngon chu ondi teni har che sha bigi chawa mambu chi nor yobaji tongres den tongres tara tudi kab tudi ya gyobat shukchenbu dinde kisigres tadi gyobat ke vaina ta chi nekab gyobat pe shuk thabu ki kabdula 소소라 마기와 초와딘데 용식으로 와서라 다들 아니 추모도 삼서 다 뺏사샤 다들 나 티키는 레몬도 삼서 지 소소소 지마 빠심도야도다 딘데 용식 버지레스라
Then once we are kind of introduced to Dharma, and then with that understanding, when we try to reflect back, when we try to reflect our life, sometimes we might think that what we were thinking earlier, what we were doing earlier, was somehow mistaken with regard to the larger context of the Dharma practice. And then in such cases, you might feel demotivated. You might feel discouraged by thinking that you might even regret what you did in the past, because of that, you also might feel discouraged.
The church Tony Shevana Chujoni da Karsota Gobi Tony Samdawina Kijimu Shuju Song Yores. The neighbor to Goyach Rangan never Tamam Lord, never Kanda Jimbainaya, never the Shagdam Che Yobach. In some, never Shaya tap Karsota tap yak Shukche Shujigdi. Never change our telaya, Josum Kiat, same thing in Joba Kiadi, and in never shall be tap Kichish son yours. Never the never even Toma to Vina, and in Joba Mari, Joba Magina, never the Mintun in never Sayagi, Nyanga and Dograsra. Never the never even Tom in Joba Giri, Joba Giondi, Chinche Noson that the two Namia Michi or Sambigi, and then Domsum Tadi. The true Yamlin Chingy Shevana Shindun Kitchen Chagores.
So from the point of view of Dharma, the sense of remorse for your past mistake is considered a very crucial element in one's Dharma practice, because in order to correct our mistake, in order to rectify the mistake that we committed in the past, or rather in order to confess the mistake that we committed, a sense of remorse for your past mistake is very crucial element, and this is considered one of the most most powerful tool to rectify, or rather to confess, or rather to purify your mistakes or mistakes. And then if we could not cultivate that sense of remorse, then it indicates that we are yet to identify our mistakes as a mistake. And once we identify our mistakes as a mistake, then we automatically develop a sense of remorse for the mistakes. And with that sense of remorse, then we could also develop a sense of refraining from engaging in such activities in the future. So therefore, that is a very important element in one's practice.
Tirda yang chug nedun tondi oni maron adi maron imbangun zen chechene ani di maron chawa maron chedi ani bezun chene rigba drimni da ani domsum tengoya di ani chujibi gudun chig chagwar wasra ta dindrig samlo mambuch mamut tayan do asra kayo layo tadu sama chu nyen shi chibi kayo layo ku pendo ro diris dichi mazubayna ta ani lo khazu sirin la ya chi chu nyen chu jambayna ya pi unne ge chi laglen ngoma ditar maduna ani ta semla ya 박차 지도 시작이 열다 있네요. 펜토 투에도 카부레도 asra. 네.
If you are not able to identify the kind of misdeed as a misdeed, and try to kind of rectify that, then our actions may not become kind of fruitful in terms of Dharma practice. And by identifying our misdeed is a misdeed and try to rectify that, it is the whole purpose of Dharma practice is really to identify our misdeed and try to kind of transform and change it. And the whole purpose of Dharma practice is really, to identify and then to rectify that mistake. And this is also the most kind of practical purpose of Dharma practice, engaging in the Dharma discourses. And then if you do not kind of, implement that very practical thing, then, despite engaging in Dharma discourses for many years, it may kind of leave some imprint, but it may not have kind of larger kind of benefit with regard to transforming our mental continuum.
간선하다 추스라운다 원리 추 뭐마디 추 뭐마디 뉴문 빵바틀라 샤고거레스 추 뭐마디 베기탄 뉴문 빵바스나드라 뉴문 빵바티 뉴문 메바소야디 추 뭐마디 테레스.
So here, when we talk about Dharma practice, the real Dharma practice is really really the eradication or the elimination of negative emotions.
다 추치온디 추고마 제디 추고마디 뉴무 빵바디바이나 다추 고마 제디 카르스나 뉴무 빵비기 탑라야 점바티 뉴무 빵비기 탑 야 주바티 로 탑템바디 더 추고마 들어와서 추고마 제바디 추고마 제비여서
So therefore, the kind of engaging in the means and the method for the complete eradication of negative emotion is the true Dharma practice.
그냥 아주 땅 고짬로 시험인데 캡이 콘조스 시험인데 캡 뭐디 쉐드레스 캡 땡인디 템바 콩레스 캡 리비다로디 파비겐디 콘조 드레스 소마다다 지불지야레스 라 드레스.
So this concept is also very similar to the teaching of going for refuge in 3 jewels, where the actual refuge is identified as the Dharma. Dharma is identified as the actual refuge, and then the Buddha is identified as the teacher of the refuge, and the Sangha is identified as the kind of spiritual community or rather spiritual companion in one's practice.
다들 다 뉴무 빵비게 탑라야 주투발라야 개체슈디 인사다 개체슈디 가르에슬라운다 뉴무 빵기 요르다 요 마르세기 저들레 거다 디어레스다 뉴무 빵기 요르 요 마르세 저디 당한솔 고에 저 디렌도스라.
So here, when we talk about engaging in the complete elimination of negative emotions, the most important crucial question is the possibility of the complete eradication of negative emotions. Can negative emotion be removed?
다 뉴무 빵기 요드메 디 하코발라 빵기 비기게 뉴무 무슨 거도 아스라 뉴무 생에디 가르레스 라 뉴무 무슨디 뉴무기 아니 라 뉴무세지 제기 즉 갈수 없다 즉 탑시 삽슈디 뉴무기 교가르레 뉴무기 옹 가르레 뉴무기 젤레 가르레스 됐음고 돈에다 뉴무세지 제와나 아니 땐데 뉴무 찬상화로 즉 아니 뉴무 원진치 두그러 와서라.
And here, to understand the possibility of the complete eradication of negative emotions, the kind of most effective way to understand that is to think the possibility of first, the most important thing is to identify the negative emotions. What is negative emotions? What do we mean by destructive emotions? And in order to understand that, it's really crucial to look at negative emotions in terms of its causes, what gives rise to negative emotions, and it's what's the nature of negative emotions, and what is the function of negative emotions.
Terda the nyumung ngunzin bi kabdula nyumung gi gyu ngu ta devon chele sum gi gone ani nyumung tseju ji chebaina ta deep pendo shu yosares ro ta deep pendo kansan tini nyumung pando gu lo kiya dia tini yungu yoba ta nyumung pando gu lo dia che nguma dia cheba dia dini cha royaji ta del nenga mamu shu yosares ro.
So here, if you try to analyze negative emotions in terms of its causes, its nature, its fruit or its function, then that kind of understanding will be very kind of productive or beneficial, and through that we can also develop the mind to really the desire, or rather the wish to eradicate the negative emotions, and that also give rise to engage in a genuine Dharma practice. So this is yet again very crucial.
Pena nyumungu chele de hako waina nyumungu chele la dunghar kiech mato ra thartuna dunghar dehe mato teli shembi nyumungu chele yagaji kiyo samares ra tiza nganzula ya dunghar gyumache de yonde dunghar gyu tsu tsawa di nyumule tuk yobadi ra nyumungu chele hako waina teli tuk de yobadi ta ngunzin che tuk orwas.
So here, when we talk about the function of negative emotions, we must understand that the only function of negative emotion is to ensue more kind of misery and more problems. And once we understand that, only negative emotion is responsible for all the miseries and all the kind of problems that we encounter, then automatically we would kind of wish to eradicate that.
Tadi imbadi ani nyumu pangore songkin samalogi nyumu dungar gi tsawa imba gyu zo imba ji songudo asra ani nyumu pang sangi samalola ya dungar tsawa ni meba ji songudo ta dindi gi sama su chodom jaba na dungar gi gyu zo tsawa di nyumu imba di ya drup tugech chagiores.
So here, when they talk about the function of negative emotions, we must understand that negative emotions give rise to suffering and miseries, and those who have completely eradicated the negative emotions are kind of entirely free of suffering and miseries. So from this, we can understand that negative emotions give rise to miseries and sufferings.
Kazugi chadang rawa shuk che yung medela tamantik bada makiba ma yung yordi. Peshi ngonsum tontu yarochi.
So even even if you try to look at a very kind of generic perspective, very kind of mundane perspective, what we can see in the daily basis is that those who have those who have less gross levels of attachment and other gross levels of negative emotions, they tend to be much more happier and calm and serene. On the other hand, those who tend to have more, kind of anger and more gross levels of negative emotions, they tend to be more aggressive and more disturbed. So that is what we can see in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, that dindiki nyumu di xiaondi, that namda mambu shuji, right? That jikting sabu jachimbu jangi jimbana, that nyumu namja di shu giburendo asra. Nyumu jati shedong se, bena tanga ziwana, nyumu jati shedong se ji sungu asra. That dindiki be any shibtsakbu shuji samdamatu wana yanganzu, tanda nganzu nyongwe chubdenge nganzu dechakdang, shedangdang, chakdola sobi be, any nyumu tsawa songde tindiji asra. That ditsul cha shabana, ditsul kanda jires. Ditsul ani that shele da peshi nganzu samlo madar mado, ditsul shukchi ondi nganzu la magiba mado, ngone tani kibu mewa da nganzu malhele deni samdamwana hako tuye jiredo asra. That dindigi nyumundigi ani ta ngond kanda jires lawe diredo asra.
So here, when we talk about negative emotions or destructive emotions, there are elaborated ways and very detailed descriptions about the function and the different typology of negative emotions. For instance, there are kind of 84,000 different types of negative emotions. If one really were to go deep into this domain. However, even if you don't, even if you could not kind of delve that much deeper, if you try to simply look at the gross levels of the negative emotions that are very kind of evident to us. For instance, when attachment, hatred, and jealousy arises in us, automatically we become disturbed and unhappy. So it's from our own experience, we can simply say that negative emotions such as jealousy and hatred disturbed our peace and serenity. So this is how negative emotions kind of triggers or rather disturbs our mental peace. And then the most important question is what is the nature of negative emotion?
Tadinani penan decha dawale ya cha shawana kandajiri ngond kandajiri islaundi decha kanla kisa yul tige ani pigi ta kharsota sel sedam mintumbi sel gejoch ra pigi yul dela pena tangan thanga dago bana yul dela ya jitse gyachangab chutambo yobana gyachangab chutambo yana gyachar trugchu dunju gechu gubchu ta dengi lo sore chagido asra dashati yul ti nechudam necheli gewa ta dengi chilaya ani dasha rogu yores dasha ki ngong dindi chayores.
So here, when we talk about the nature of negative emotions, first, let's take the example of attachment. And so here, when we say attachment is a negative emotion that perceives its object more than it is. Attachment exaggerate the object, exaggerate the quality of the object. For instance, if the object, let's say, has weight around 50 kilograms or pounds, then the attachment will exaggerate its quality. It perceives as 70 or 60s. So the point is that when we try to look at object through the lens of attachment, attachment tend to exaggerate the quality of the object and sees more than what the reality of the object.
Tirada pigi decha kan kesa yul digi nelu demba ngoma thondi decha de kaddu no dog rogre maton decha de shukchin rog mares
So when when we perceive the true nature of the object of the attachment, when we see the true nature, then automatically the negative emotion, so the attachment will reduce, and it will never increase.
Did she were the control Tagarares? Control Tagarares. And in Piggy Tejili Betty Gayuch Tagiores. Tejili Gayu de Shishani Drondi, and it Tejili gave a later Tada Fi the Legmarasra.
So same is the true with anger. When we try to look at things from the lens of anger always tend to exaggerate something that is not there. And then if we look at things with an exaggerated perspective, we will always see an exaggerated kind of thing. We could never see at the object with a true kind of perspective.
Then on the control show, say on the Piggy the Dugja shows control Sasa Yul, the Dugja shows Tongrada. The only Piggy Yul the Muyu Nitsu Tondi, control the shit over the mother, and in control the church in the Drogmares.
For instance, when we are angry with somebody, we see the object of angry totally kind of unattractive and very kind of disturbing. However, when we see the true nature of the object of our anger, then this will kind of automatically it will pacify the anger. It will never cause or it will never trigger more anger.
The Dintri Jitagi Yobadi, Dintri Yimbadi, Neluk Dribi Ribiton. Jomden dig the Chunamji Nelu Tombani Tena Papa the Shuji Kitchen Soya, Numu Pangoris, Numu Pangia Badia, Nelu Dribi Ribal, then Numu Pangia of Drugi or Astra. Nelu Ton the Numu Dogmena, and Nelu Tombani Tobi Logi, Numu Pang Toyag Junsen Shamba Chicken Yomaris.
So therefore, the most crucial or most powerful means to transform negative emotion is to see the reality, see the truth. And once we see the truth or reality of the object, automatically all the negative emotions will kind of, will be eliminated. So if by seeing the true nature of things, let's say emptiness, could not, eradicate negative emotions, then there is no kind of point to understand that, by perceiving the truth, it is possible to kind of eliminate negative emotions. So it's only by, perceiving the truth, then the possibility of eliminating the negative emotions will come.
Things that the Nilu Dribi Rigby Tobi Kari Drib Tursadi, Narzo Norde Yavachik. Kadu in on the Tatsul Norde Yavadi, moving Nilu Lateni, Tokoyachi. Teachagazra.
So when we try to look at things from a perspective of, from the perspective of understanding the true nature of the things, we could always see that we always kind of hold a distorted view, and by perceiving the true nature of the things, we could dismantle that distorted view.
There's the Mishambajigi, Karan Norshas Lavana, in a Nadrojlia. Gishi Karan Norshas Lavana, then the long Lansi Rasra. Ah, you may not winning that Jomden Digi Ma Nanshavi, Lavja Samodi, Chunam Nilu Divi, Ribitolia, Samlutani, Ribot Jimni, Chebaj Chetubana, one is Susita Sultan Norguaba, and the Kellen Chetuyagi, and nobody, Pobadi.
However, it might be kind of difficult at the outset to accept that we have distorted views. for instance, if somebody says that, Geshe-la, you are wrong on this thing, or you are wrong on that thing, I might get triggered. However, if you try to look at the situation from the perspective of from the perspective of realizing the true nature of the things, then there is a possibility to identify, not only to identify, but to kind of recognize that we do have a distorted view. We might have mistaken views with regard to things.
다 딘디 상당한디 데니 차단 유무승이디 아니 넬룩 마시비 왕기 넬룩 마시비 왕기 차단 유무 깨기여바디다 다 세우 슈즈 줍 투구여레스라 세우 슈즈 줍 투구여레스.
So if you try to look at how the destructive emotions arises, we can now kind of say that negative emotions such as attachment and hatred arises only due to ignorance of the true nature of the things, due to not seeing the true nature of the things.
데다 단넬룩 마시비 로기 왕기 차단 유무 끼기였을 돌아 상단 넬룩 마시바 넬룩 마시비 로 원진 치발라 넬룩 돌아 상단에 마도 아니 넬룩 마시비 로 원진 치단 샴바직 답이 요 말했어. 이제는 요 말했어. 진짜 넬룩 돌아 가주스기 리버 드는 상단 바이나 아니 간수 균딩기 아니 비 최남기 넬룩레야베 타치도 비 신줄로도 슈데바지 간다다 데바지 딘디기 따지 로 마리바디 뉴무 짜와 차단 뉴무 짜와 마리바디 원전 체토야지 용거레스 넬룩 때문에 상무지 담아이나.
So here, when we talk about distorted mind, in order to understand what kind of mental attitude is distorted, we really need to understand its object, and the more we delve deeper into this fact, we could finally see that many of our daily many of the ideas that we have are in fact contrary to the true nature of things. And not only that, the very root of the negative emotion is the fundamental ignorance.
Terda nelu dondu samdaondi nelu kazusuki tontuba ti tsugi nelu la mombi lodi garuyoba ra nelu la mombi lodi gatuyoba nelu la mombi lodi lo shinjola yimba samalo nelu ribi tobki ta dugugdas ra.
The more we reflect on the true nature of things, the reasoning to prove the true nature of things, through that, what we can understand is that many of the kind of views that we hold are in fact contrary or rather distorted with regard to the true nature of the things. And once we could identify that, we could see the possibility of eradicating and eliminating such negative emotions that are grounded on ignorance.
Terda tinza chagdan nyumung tsawa maribadi lo lokshe imbatia tatsu shinju lo imbatia pi nguyu ne chul nelu la ya shiju ani nelu tongwe tabgi lo den ga zhugu yobatia ani nelu la shiju nelu tongwe lo kombi tabgi ani shinju lo de bedi ani yal zhugu yoba se zhugu yobatia nelu la shiju gogo sares.
So here perceiving the true nature or truth is really important. Because in order to identify in order to understand that the ignorance is a distorted mind, this understanding is based on true nature of things, and the very possibility of the complete eradication of such distorted thoughts is yet again based on understanding true nature of the things. So therefore, it's really crucial to grasp the true nature of things, which not only eradicate, which could not only identify the distorted mind, but also to eradicate and completely eliminate such negative emotions.
Rada dindi chechine teni nyumu singidi nyumu pangi yoba nyumu segi yoba nyumu sebi tab ten ani da sherabla ya tu yoba ro o dindi kita jitembu shoji tsuk tu ya ji yungo sares ro nyumu gi tambu nyumu gi chele di nganzula ya dunga te yoba hako ani dindi gi dunga te dingi gi nyumu di ngōndi 아니 로신주 로직 임바당 아니 디기 싸워대야 내루 몸비 몸바 마리발라 때니 규틴디질라 때니 종요가 딘디지기 뉴무기 규งู아니 첼레스음도 하고 와이나 당원의 최 남다지 전에 송제비 최 남다지 제투야지 근데 디 근데 추주지 최 남다지 와이나 디 최고 소소라야 아니 펜도 랍첨부 용돼야지 니마지 제도나 딜레이트 랍치어 돈라지 제도나 딜 아니 로는 제도나 다 원이 랍첨부 쇼지 펜로 첨부 쇼지 용투에 디니 용구야사레스
So, so here when we talk about negative emotions, the very possibility of the very possibility of eliminating the negative emotions and the means of negative emotions are all related with cultivating wisdom. So through wisdom we could understand the very possibility of eradicating distorted thoughts, and through wisdom we can also kind of actualize the means to eradicate that. And moreover, once we understand the function of negative emotions as something that gives rise to problems and miseries, that the function of negative emotion is to give rise to more problems and miseries, and the nature of negative emotion is a distorted mind, and then the negative emotions are grounded on ignorance. So once we fully understand the cause, nature, and the function of negative emotions in that kind of succinct way, then with that understanding, if we engage in Dharma practice, our Dharma practice will become very kind of beneficial and productive. So with that understanding, even if we engage in Dharma practice for 1 hour, that will become very productive and meaningful. And if you could engage more, of course, it will become even more meaningful and productive.
마도 자위기다지 야유 고송투된도서 제 아니 곰바딘딜란로 아니 데스데스 몰람도 겨 아니 곰데스 갸와이나 야구다로 왔어 아니 차와 마라 비지 셴라야 nø세기 차와다 마롱와 마탕이 차와 아니 chen 로데발다 단다디 타기로 왔어 임바이나야 딜레 쇼지기 아니 펜돌랍 첨부 용야 소수메센디나란 요식 첨부 땅투야기 니버디 메타저로 왔어 아니 차단 유무베 아니 고투야 니버디 비게 따중만함지 갸와도 chen 로와 잠지기 아니 차단 유문 고투고 메바디다 세부로 왔어 단도지 아니 유문 귀견다 아니 딘디 마데바 닐루탄라 상로 마다와이나 아니 간주지 아니 소수기 취 가르치거나야 디 출루디 콘라야 슈바이나 단도 차단 끼야 귤 줘야 주지 마도 아니 차단 용 줘야 줘야 돼 카브랜도 쓰라 만 사망 카브랜도 쓰라 수수수 초도지 시온디 초도 텔레야 현자기지 셴바기지 차바기지 아니 셴발야 다마기야 귤 줘도 쓰다 참으신 줘도 쓰라
So, here, sometimes, kind of practices such as kind of, prostrating to the three jewels, the statues of the three jewels, and engaging in certain kind of, meditation. Of course, these are, good and meaningful practices, but we have to understand that if our practices really could counteract the fundamental negative emotions, so once we understand that kind of destructive nature of the negative emotions, then and if we could not perceive the destructive nature, then our practice may not become that much productive or beneficial, because merely praying could not remove or rather eradicate the negative emotions. Therefore, it is really crucial to kind of try to eliminate the negative emotions, and if we, without developing certain understanding of the true nature, then our practices may not even become a genuine practice, because if we could not try to develop wisdom, then what happens is that many of our practices may become causes for even more kind of hatred and division. So therefore, sometimes our way of thinking perceives to kind of attach to our own kind of group, and then feeling aversion to the other kind of side. So therefore, it is really crucial to check that kind of mental attitude.
나도 주주군의 넘버 상기와 다 인스라고 알아. 주주군의 처치 도스로리냐. 소소 냠뇨라. 원데 피기털에 섬야 우스타마드나 나 넘버 인 삼선로지. 아니 넘버 많이 버도지. 아니 독자소르다 야와도 로키야디 레라우 쇼레다다. 레라우 쇼레다스라. 데 디체바이나 아니 좀된 디기 제스 드비 고든 엄마드 상금다스라. 좀된 디기 제스 드야디 차단 유무 고야지. समझा थाम चला यार रंयम तातु है अनि वे ने राम ले यें खींचे विगे अनि समलतांग तुगे दी अनि चमदे दी जेस दु गदन चोर दिले दे दासरा.
Yes. So for instance, if I take kind of myself an example, someone who is supposed to be a Buddhist from a very young age, so there is always that tendency for me to think that to develop some kind of attachment or affinity to the Buddhist, and kind of feel aversion to the other practitioners. So that tendency is always there. But if you could not check that, then our the entire practice will become distorted. So the real essence of Buddhist teaching is really to embrace all the sentient beings, and eradicate attachment and all the destructive emotions, and try to include and embrace all sentient beings, and try to put others before self.
단단한 잠불이 나올래야 출룩 제 맹인기 라 출룩 관계야 콘스 만둥이 때 미망부 쇼여라서라 군주 릭지라 간절히 차단 용어서라지 라 간주 이 적도 세야기 차 통마 매번에 차단 모섬 비기다 최대와 찍려야 안 소수 적도 텔미 비 차단 슈크체르로야 소리지 자 인가 빼도서라.
for instance, there are many non-believers in this world, and sometimes, these non-believers tend to have much less attachment, as compared to those who who are believers, because those who believe or are part of certain tradition, they tend to have some kind of attachment towards one's own tradition and try to have some aversion towards the other traditions. So therefore, sometimes those non-believers tend to have much less attachment and negative emotions.
라 간주 출루바다 출루바 가시 소수기 출루디 따와딘 진진데 출루 샴발라 쇼지 단수 당부시 딩이 요라스라.
So
야 딘디 요라스라.
So we could even see into this world that those who are claim to be part of a particular religious tradition, they are very much kind of attached towards one's own tradition and somehow distant from other traditions.
땅 오니 비 좀는 디기 송샤베 네루고 탄라야 송로지 땅체 아니 차단 니문디 라 치로고 유마인바 랑기 셈나로 예비 차단 니문디 네제 임바다 디피 바 아니 분좀 지에 돌아야 송로지 땅투바이나 땅 오니 출루바 치 고던디 야부진 줍사레스 라
Yes. So therefore, to become a true genuine practitioner, it is really kind of crucial to see things from the larger context of understanding the true nature as Buddha taught. And from this kind of context, what we can see is that the object of attachment and aversion or hatred is not there outside, but it's all kind of projection of our mind. And then once we could understand that, then all our practices will become genuine practice and genuine Dharma practice.
들다 딘디 통온디더니 아니 다 작단 유무 아니 세비 탑 아니 타르두바디 다 네루 통위 로디임바 아니 네루 통위 로디기 아니 비기 작단 유무 고발아야 다지 적다 마소나 아니 땡긴진다 아니 수중기라바 고고여바 도 스톤디 되니 아니 까지 누구리 간다지 지고 촌나 오늘 드라피 뉴무토 섬디 아니 매워서야다 탑 간다지 여바이나야 텔레 주투야지 용기여서레스 홍기 제우다마즈 용거다 메제코를 르탄치니 피기 뉴문기 갑딜 랑투고여라 간선도 피기데 뇌진 타르두바 피기 임바디 하공디 아니 텔레 동nen치 투고여라서 당간주 마투야디 간주 차단 뉴무 뇌제 임바 만통아 잠마세 피기 따지 소소라 고야기 소리 통치 아니 차단 유무 기위기 탑 갑갈이야 기위기 탑들이 때때들이 마무 용거라
So so now it's when we talk about how can we eradicate negative emotions and how can we remove these. It is again the mind that perceives the true nature of the things, and once we could cultivate the mind that perceives the true nature of the things, it should be again coupled with concentration and practice of morality. So with these three, we could engage in a means to eradicate negative emotions. And the fact that many practitioners, many past practitioners who remain so committed in the practice is because of really because of seeing that negative, because of seeing that negative emotions are destructive, because of perceiving the destructive nature of negative emotions, and the very fact that we somehow are not very committed in our practice is also due to not being able to perfectly seeing the destructive nature of emotions. And if we could perceive the true kind of destructive nature of negative emotions, then we will be so compelled to engage in a means to eradicate that, and to be, because of the fact that we are not we are not being yet to fully comprehend the true destructive nature of the true destructive nature of negative emotions. Therefore, instead of engaging in a means to eradicate negative emotions, somehow we tend to engage in means that could trigger even more negative and destructive emotions.
더들다 더 뉴무 방비 쳇도 뉴무 방비 방바 토비 쳇도 아니 람라바스물야 랍치니 냠네 지야기 남자디 아니 세버시존 이갈이야 케바 강해요 말했어 지금 찍기야레스 넘버 3기 위치 좀 된디 지주다 넘버 3기와 지인바이나 디 냠네 제거야디 상말로 찍버려 마도 델리아 테버 최종다 딘디 케바 강해요 말했어.
So, in order to eradicate the destructive emotions, in order to completely eradicate the negative emotions, we have to engage in the practices of three trainings: training in morality, concentration, and wisdom. So that is kind of common to both Mahayana as well as Hinayana tradition. So that practice is common to both traditions.
다드네 디기자와디안 대와대바단 둥가문대와 투구여바디 다 세우셔지라스라 안주 대두기 지기 니 대와대바단 둥가문대비기 로디 제스 탐와라바지 로디 셰샤가 토니 안주 자와 사마를 지기여라스라 안주 자와 가르쳐바디 아니 셰샤사디 대와대바단 둥가문대바 디스 돈이 레치기 열었어. 딘디기 로지 매바이나 아니 자와는 주고에 그걸 문도 왔더라.
So many of the activities that we are engaging in are kind of driven by our desire to achieve happiness and desire to kind of eradicate unhappiness. So based on this desire to achieve happiness and eradicate unhappiness, we are kind of compelled to engage in all forms of activities.
다드니 태부 체중기 남생이 연구열이 대다가라레스. 랑기 대바당 랑기 동할 세위 체도 아니 람라바스물 라바디 아니 가르쳐다지 갸총하다 딘디지 코란지 다 셴슬라온디 셴 라나지 데오데바다 동안만도 찡총 임발아야 케바 가르었는데 라한다 셴이 셴 기체와 임바지 통 토니 아니 셴기 동아세 위치도 람라바스물야 주야디 아니 태부 셴보세 셴데 드니는 거여라스라.
So, and then there is this concept of Mahayana and the greater vehicle and the lesser vehicle. So that very concept is also based on the desire to attain kind of liberation. So if your motivation is to attain liberation for your own sake, to remove and eradicate for your own destructive emotions, then that approach is called lesser vehicle. However, if your approach is to eradicate destructive emotions, and for that, if you are engaging in three trainings for the benefit of all sentient beings, then that approach is called greater vehicle.
다들당 간좀 samlushu sabu madana susu digna digwatoji susu yabu chonda tagarangi tsambatoji ani samlu nang yongyorasra ta dia nongdrin sares pecha javana nami jigin bayna chik chiglaya samsheda chik chiglaya roba chemaduna 남은 야부 말았더라. 남은 센데 차기 말았더라. 근데 교가로 오지 뭐나 랑기 사달이야 삼시 치마도가 비길이야 비기 되둘이야 따마둥이지만 교가 탭자지 차고 알아더라.
So, um, so if we, kind of look at situation from a very kind of a narrow perspective, then sometimes we tend to feel that if you do not have any kind of problem, if you're okay with everything, then you tend to think that it's everything is fine. But that is somehow a mistaken and distorted way of distorted approach. For instance, even if you look at a family, for instance, if the husband is not able to kind of being considerate and being able to understand the well-being of his wife, and if the wife is not able to perceive the needs and the aspiration of her husband, then somehow that is not a kind of, how to put it, kind of healthy relationship. So similarly, if your approach is only limited for your own well-being alone, that is definitely a distorted attitude, distorted approach.
틴자다 nganzu digi samalo nganzu goyo digi samalo shen deni jungo yanza kan tensa gi shen di chete che goya de mitjangbu ani chongbu jimba na nguyo chago res ra nguyo chago res 틴자 에 대부 쳔뷰기 최대한 nguyo nesuji ya tuk debaji 딘디레도 다 간지 돌드나 산지 좀 된디 당하는 통질라 산지 좀 된디 최비 아니 지 대바 최종 사람도 동하고 최 사람도 용수 접어디 비무비 내루려야 시주 대바지 등원이 차고요레스
So so here when we talk about one's own kind of happiness, one's own well-being, one's own happiness, and one's own happiness is largely dependent on others. So therefore, if you are, any wise would definitely care for the well-being of others, because caring for others ultimately lead to one's own happiness and one's own well-being. So therefore, the entire kind of body of Buddha's teaching, whether it belongs to the greater vehicle or lesser vehicle, whether it belongs to the sutra or tantra, whatever, that the entire body of Buddha's teachings are really dependent on the true nature of the things. So he taught based on the nature of reality.
The chud ma sondi doja la teondi pi doje kamda meba mandawa inza tela ya tiyagi tablamla ani karina soncho gore mado tengubi netsula sanji 좀 된디기 추줄디 nguyo netsudan tumbaji 토네 로거를 마도 nguyo netsudan mantum바지 아니 산지 좀 된디기 추지 요사 말이스
So all the teachings that Buddha gave, all the discourses, are taught based on the diverse mental disposition of the disciples. So because of the kind of diversity of the mental disposition of his disciples, he he took many different methods of teaching. However, the main kind of the entire teaching, the main essence is again based on the true nature of things.
답변이 결혼서 저땅에 뒤졌을 레스타스로 한등에 내셔야지 득설에 저기까지 전에 하고 뺀도스.
Now, if you have any questions, we can dedicate some time for that.
Thank you. Inside the human mind, a human can have 18 micropsychotic episodes a day. Equally, the human mind can have creative inspirations. They're similar, but they're separate. And I'm wondering, for conditions of mind, is there anything inside the precepts that aid people in being more aware of the negative aspects of the psychotic micro expressions and more aware of the potentials in the creative expressions?
디기나 세부 쉬우지도 고만서도 피치 인트레스팅 거스를 가지고 지다 셈 나눠라 그 레벨이 제레게 토네로 레벨이 제레게 토네 남규 담아지 용교 레스트라 남규 릭직 나가 삼도 가서 텐시 유르부 토네 삼도 코레라 소바다 야 릭직 디게 도쇼라이나 소바 셈비 토네 남규 담아를 튀어고레스 지자 아닌 가서다 다 돈바송야라 소바 딘디기 냠레기 토네 셈기 남규티 가서로 수 웬세 토보 용해라 인데 탑람도 딘디게 요레베스
탑람 요레스라 탑람 여드 요레스라 나 지라다
Yes, there are methods to really to enhance the kind of subtle potential of our mind.
다짜비 간주기 신고에 찍려야 내가 최슈디 아니 샘슬라원디 비 찍랑질이야 sometimes 샘려야 샘지 용구도 아스라 배나 간주기 샘델야 차라니 용구요레스 니체요레스 그래서 배 계신부 인사레스라 아니 샘 라바디 원시 제수로 되버지 배나 일로 도지나 일로 라바디 원시 제수로 되버지 원비시바 원봉갈 댐비기 남시죠라 델야 아니 하장 그 뜻을 침부여 되버 직차가 어레스 딘디글로 도진 바나 원볼에 뜨고요레스 원보 냠굴 가주스 침바 뒤쪽이 아니 일로 라바디 아니 세바다 마시위 케바디 용구여서레스
So here, it's really kind of, important to understand that when we talk about mind, we should not have the notion that mind is somehow a single unitary thing. But when we talk about mind, it has many different aspects. There are many different subtleties of mind. And especially when the difference between the subtle and gross levels of the mind is yet again very important. For instance, the more gross levels of the mind are highly contingent upon the sensory faculties as its kind of substratum. They are highly dependent on the 5 sensory faculties. And, since they are highly dependent on the sensory faculties, then the kind of, the functions of the sensory faculties also have a huge influence on on such kind of mind.
된다 샘 라바디 샘 가서 샘 참모디 단단간주기 샘 라바 슈침 부여비 갑둘라 아니 샘 참모디기 율리안 주투고요 말레스 디 율리안 주투비 탑람 찍송요라 디 탑람 삽슈디 테니 다 gyugshoni, ngakshoni, ra sangakshoni, ta sunguyores, ra. Ta ding anzu chigdeni ta de shet ta di sunguyores ra.
So here, when we talk about the subtle mind and the gross level of the mind, when the gross levels of the mind are very active, very active. So it somehow hinders the functioning or the mechanism of the subtle levels of the mind. So when the gross levels are more active, the subtle mind remains kind of dormant. So the more descriptive or elaborated description of this functioning of this subtle mind is explained in the Vajrayana literature.
다단다 간주기 다 샘락바지로다 로샘 남시 주기요비나니 이시딜야 차라니시니 이시락바디 이시락바디기 토니다 곰갸나다 상로타나다 참말로 이시락바디 토는 조기요라서 다디 시부다 템부용야디 고 원시기 지수 조기연자 원시를 띄고를 원시 칸의 계획이 지도 온볼을 띄고요레스 원보디 다 원보디 비기게 류 차시진자 조다 직장 틀레라 소바 아니 레베 차시라다 하정 떼접 전부 차기요라서 류 작은 조단디 아니 레베 잘에 쇼지기 아니 떼접 전부 차고라다 지 작이 비 자와도디 레벨에 투요가디다 우여로와서
So here, when we talk about six sensory faculties, six sensory mind, or rather consciousness, the sixth one is called the mental consciousness, and the mental consciousness could be also broken down into a gross level and the subtle level. So all the meditation practices that we engage kind of fall into the category of the gross level of the mental consciousness, and that again is dependent on its substratum sensory faculty, and all these, since they are highly contingent upon the sensory faculties, so therefore the functions of the sensory faculties also have a huge impact on its mind as well. And not only that, they are also dependent on its substratum, such as, since they are dependent on the faculty or its faculty, and it's yet again dependent on many different levels of winds, channels, and winds and channels. So therefore, we could also say that they are somehow ultimately dependent, or rather contingent, upon the functions of brain as well.
The dinza 아니 대한지 간주 수비기 원봉아디 딱 냉가지 차기도 왔어라. 디 수부 다르니까스 수부 하장 수부 약비니까스 수부라야 누바예비 슈기예비니까스 아니 수부디 약부 냐치 원비고도스 dom체 아니 엔 상로 땅바이나 아니 템바당 디 남샤디 다 누바침부 쇼지 텐투기어레스 라 다 베능아로지 로야스 레온디 롱갑주 투즈네 레온디 비긴 간주 류고 엄보란싱이 냠로거레스 엄보 냠로온디 엄보 코라 마세바 엄보 누바디 냠로온디 엄보 템비기 남시데 쿄르로거레스 데니 다 원식 제수 중에 이시 락바디야 차와체토야디 템발라 소바디 아니 라야다 도서 연구여라스라 남시 탐무디 베주체토야기에 냠네디에 체마투 남시 라바 용사기 아니 자와 비기 루 엄보데 냠온디 되는 건줄 템발라 안토야 소바디 연구여라스라
So here all the sensory faculties, sense consciousness, are highly contingent on its sensory faculties, sense organs. So when we are when we are healthy, and when we are, when we could kind of restrain our sense organs, then the sense consciousness which are dependent upon that organ, somehow could remain very active. However, once we kind of started to age, once our health started to deteriorate, what happens is that the organs also started to deteriorate, and because of that, the sense consciousness, which are contingent upon the senses, upon the organs, also tend to deteriorate. Their kind of function somehow diminishes. They may not be as active as before. So here, in that case, what happens is that once we age, our sense organs started to deteriorate, and because of that, the sense consciousness and the gross level of mental consciousness also started to deteriorate. Our levels of memory, our levels of attention, all started to deteriorate. So in that case, what happens that now, if you could not, undertake a practice to utilize the subtle level of the mind, then all kind of memories, we tend to lose memories. There is all these kinds of problems are triggered by this fact, because we are not able to utilize the subtle level of the mind, the mechanism of the subtle levels of the mind, and the gross levels of the mind are all starting to deteriorate and diminish.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to ask a question. I'm almost certain it's a Zen Buddhist practice, but the practice is looking in the mind for the darkest part of the darkness, which ensures that eventually you begin to find the brightest part of the light. And as Geshe is talking about necessity and the subtle and the gross mind, personally, I find it a good vehicle for coming away from the gross mind. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that Geshe could share in this area as well, please.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat the last part of your question?
I just say if there's anything Geshe could share in the subject of the practice of the darkest part, the meditation called the darkest part of the darkness, and its relationship to moving away from the gross mind, and perhaps even that aspect of, he has said, it's a relationship to the necessity. So you'll be more likely to fall into the attraction of a micropsychosis if you are in a place where you're necessarily pushed towards the gross mind.
Okay. Tanda Koran Tibachik te dere shakila. Tanda Zen ki chuluk yorwa ta tso nihong da tewa Zen ki chuluk. Di namlo la tanda mikse gom ki nyamlin chiyo sar. And gom ki nyamlin di namlo la karsik dula na karza wata tsik teka chawshla we na chik yu ki niluk seshu di tong hai la sta ku pe di karshakila na pet naku nalo ni che nakshu yorwa ta. Di nalo teba na karchasi na mudu secha the seshu de tongre se soroch tende chi sarda tenda dokto di ki khanda gacha ro de tewa na di ki dokcho lo di ki tende ko tende chi mena khanda nakun la chi zam tewe chögi ne we thong la rewa che yor se tende ki kom ki nyamne chi tos chi san di ta tanda nga zo sem ra pe ki chile ta chik se joro dini paru la chik rewa ra chi khande chi yo ba yinas ani thama di lapsum ngantsuki tiri yarwa kila ta yang samsam ta sem rapi ki chele ki thola chik shukrabu chi kya abdani chewe kapsula yang di kichi shure samni yang tes cholung shora ki chik kangi chi yungu dwa ta nyamli ki tanda kichi shure diri labi kapsula yang di ki thola ta di yakshu insar samsam ki yang cholung ki lo yunga ki nyanga chi yungu dwa ta dindri dongle chi tanda yang kanti inas.
Tadi nyanga tsangma le tortuya di pigila ya penada tanda nga tsu duwa na 라버송고 냠네 시기도 하더라. 라버송고 냠네 디 찍을 찍된 바지. 찍을 찍된 바지. 토네 라버송고 냠네 디 땡여 마도 아니 디펜스 때 무거 딘지 싸우는 말이 왔어. 이번에 수종 냠네 개치 무쇼래 땡이즈데 개치 무쇼래 제로 개치 무쇼지래스. 개찍리지 개치야. 이번 디 냠네 치용디 그게 아니 시카르도 아니 드네 카르카르 연구도 딘디 남자들이야 장바이나 아니 냥가들이 털투사리스로.
So here, I think the most crucial thing to do is really to have some kind of understanding with regard to the practice of 3 higher trainings, or rather the 3 trainings. So here, when we talk about the 3 trainings, of course, all of them are, individually very important, but somehow, not only they are individually important, but one practice is, we could not have the notion that one practice is somehow more important than other. All of them are equally important, and all of them are dependent on one another. For instance, the practice of morality is individually important, but it's also its efficacy is dependent on the practice of concentration and wisdom. So similarly, the practice of concentration is important, but its efficacy is yet again dependent on 2 other trainings. So therefore, if you could develop such kind of holistic approach, then all our practices will become kind of could fall into this framework.
근데 당부디 또 뜻사 된적 시거라더라. 뜻사 된적. 로 락비기 차와 가주스 제투버 디츠기 로 타모디 엘야 니버테 토에디 용구여레스. 라 샘 락비기 차와 제거해줘라. 샘 락비 내가서 차와 제거해디 아니 마지와지 타모 샘바지 요르삼 세대바나 디 할로거레스.
So similarly, the function, or the mechanism of subtle and gross levels of the mind, somehow they are also very dependent on one another. The more we kind of, activate the potential of the gross levels of the mind, somehow it will definitely have an impact on the subtle function of the subtle mind. So therefore, they are also highly, contingent upon one another.
도시 대샤소라. Thank you so much.
Vacation prayers on page 12 on the screen. My 2 types of merits, vaster space that I've amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may become a chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds, wisdom, eyes blinded by ignorance. If I do not reach this state, may I be held in your love and compassion for all my lives, Manjushri. May I find the best to complete graded paths of the teachings. May I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness in the minds of all beings. With the points of the paths, as I have discerned them, may I behold the Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted the bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time. By even this graded path to enlightenment completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths, never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone who makes effort to act in accordance with the 10-fold Mahayana virtuous practices, may always be assisted by the mighty ones, may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Jangchu Sencho Rinpoche, Magye Panam Kegyoche, Kepanyam Pame Payang, Gone Gondu Pelwa Sho.